On the 9th of September 2005, a horror movie opened on the big screen in theaters across America. The Exorcism of Emily Rose, true to its title, was a disturbing portrayal of extreme religious fervor, ancient religious rites, and the negligent homicide of a young woman deemed to be possessed by multiple demons. Although audiences loved the film, one critic made a poignant observation that the film-going public didn't realize. The Exorcism of Emily Rose, while compelling at times, is nothing more than a blatant attempt to utilize a real human tragedy for an agenda. The real human tragedy he wrote about in his critique was the real-life exorcism and death of Anneliese Michel. Welcome to Bad Things. In today's video, we will delve into this tragic story of Anneliese Michel and what most likely happened in the death of this 23-year-old woman. Was it due to supernatural entities, religious delusion, or manslaughter? Anneliese's childhood. Anneliese Michel was born on September 21, 1952, in Leibelfing, Bavaria, West Germany, to devoted Catholic parents Joseph and Anna Michel. Some sources claim that 4 years before Anneliese's birth, her mother bore an illegitimate daughter, Martha. This was a cause of humiliation and disgrace for Anneliese's mother's deeply devout Catholic family. After marrying Joseph, where she was made to wear black on her wedding day for the shame she had brought upon her family, and after giving birth to Anneliese, she reportedly suffered from crippling remorse about her illegitimate daughter. Unfortunately, Anneliese's elder sister died when she was 8 years old during surgery to remove a kidney tumor. Later in life, Anneliese felt compelled to repent for her mother's immorality and spent much of her time doing penance for her mother, the world's sinful youth, and evil priests. For some unknown reason, Anneliese felt driven to atone for the wrongdoing of others around her, even sleeping on the floor as penance for heroin users she noticed sleeping on the ground at the train station one day. Photos of her from her childhood depict a lively, beautiful child on her path to becoming an elegant woman. She had shining black hair, an open, honest face, and an enchanting smile that could brighten up every room. This would all change in her teenage years. Anneliese's problems start. In 1968, at the age of 16, Anneliese started suffering blackouts, the first being while at school. When she awakened, her classmates noted that she seemed to be in a daze. She had no recollection of the experience, and people around her characterized her as being in a trance-like state. 1 year later, in 1969, Anneliese had a similar incident when she awoke in a trance-like state, this time wetting her bed after losing control of her bladder. She began to tremble, her body quaking and convulsing in a way that left onlookers gripped by the chilling fear that she was in the grip of demonic possession. After another episode, Anneliese visited her doctor on August 24, 1969, and was sent to Dr. Siegfried Luthi, a neurologist. An EEG was performed which showed no obvious problems, but the doctor suspected she was suffering from grand mal seizures. He elected not to give her medication since she had only encountered 2 seizures at this time. During the course of her treatment under Dr. Luthi, Anneliese's tonsils inflamed, necessitating a tonsillectomy. Shortly after her operation, she had pneumonia, which was further worsened by TB. Due to these multiple health problems, she was forced to withdraw from school for the 1969 to 1970 academic year. Anneliese's condition then deteriorated to the point that she needed to be admitted to a hospital specializing in the treatment of children with lung illnesses. Because she was not recovering as planned, Anneliese was moved to a tuberculosis clinic in Bavaria. Because of her reclusive personality, Anneliese often distanced herself from the other youngsters receiving treatment at the facility, and her peers characterized her as stuck-up and antisocial. During her stay in the hospital, she suffered a 3rd seizure at night, resulting in sleep paralysis. She said she felt a massive weight on her and lost control of her bladder. When she came out of her trance, she started screaming, and the other children taunted her for it, claiming she was insane or possessed by the devil. When Anneliese was first found after her screams rang out, the other children said she had an angry expression locked on her face, and her hands were rigidly locked like a cat extending their claws. Several days later, Anneliese had another episode. It began while she was praying and detected the whiff of violets in the air, followed by a sense of euphoria. The other children, seeing this, asked whether she was all right, but her hands remained frozen in a stance like a cat extending its claws, as before. Although this episode sounds disturbing, Anneliese felt happy and attributed her happiness throughout the day to the Virgin Mary. Anneliese would later chase this previously experienced feeling of euphoria and spent much of her time obsessively praying to the Virgin Mary. Following this episode, Anneliese was examined by another physician, von Haller, who discovered abnormal brain waves and diagnosed her with epilepsy, for which he prescribed anti-seizure medicine. The doctor also diagnosed her with cardiac and circulation problems. Despite her new medication, Anneliese's seizures continued, and one evening while praying she saw a brief flash of a threatening face. She later said that this made her afraid of praying. These terrifying images would continue to haunt her for the rest of her life. Anneliese's general health slowly improved, and she was discharged from the hospital and returned home to live with her family. When she returned home, her sister said that Anneliese was often angry, had outbursts, and started to express anger against the church for her condition. During the 1970 to 1971 school year, Anneliese continued to experience seizures, prompting her family to take her to various physicians and specialists. Frustrated by her lack of progress with her health issues, she immersed herself in Christian literature and started to feel that her suffering was for a greater spiritual purpose. After enrolling at the University of Würzburg in 1973, Anneliese completed her studies to become a teacher. While at university, she hung portraits of the saints on the walls of her dorm room, kept holy water by the door, and recited the rosary on a daily basis. On September 3, 1973, during her visit with Dr. Luthi, Anneliese said that the devil was in her, and on hearing this, the doctor determined that she was no longer capable of making her own decisions. He determined that she had schizophrenia or bipolar disorder in addition to her epilepsy. Those close to Anneliese started to notice changes in her conduct and attitude. Because of her deepening depression, she became more reclusive and resentful. Her emotional turmoil grew so intense that she contemplated ending things herself. In time, she came to describe it not as a depression, but as a condition unto itself. She felt as if she was being controlled by forces beyond her control, and said that her will was not her own. She mentioned feeling numb and unable to love. She suddenly began isolating herself from her small circle of friends and started socializing with more devoutly religious students. She began to tell her family that she believed the end of the world was imminent and that she would need to be the one to tell people about it. While praying one day, she saw what she described as diabolical faces, and as time passed, she revealed that she was becoming intolerant of Christian symbols and relics, including the cross. When she tried to pray, she heard voices telling her that she was condemned and was going to suffer in hell. She said that she also noticed foul odors that no one else could, such as feces or a foul burning smell. Without a clear medical explanation, and with a nudge from family friend Thea Heinz, Anneliese came to believe she was possessed by demons. Heinz, a deeply devout and conservative Catholic, began shaping this belief during a pilgrimage to the holy site of San Damiano, subtly projecting her own interpretations onto Anneliese's experiences. Father Ernst Alt, who we will get to a little later, had the following story to tell. Anneliese told me, and Frau Hein confirmed this, that she was unable to enter the shrine. She approached it with the greatest hesitation, then said that the soil burned like fire, and she simply could not stand it. She then walked around the shrine in a wide arc and tried to approach it from the back. She looked at the people who were kneeling in the area surrounding the little garden, and it seemed to her that while praying they were gnashing their teeth. She got as far as the edge of the little garden, then she had to turn back. Coming from the front again, she had to avert her glance from the picture of Christ in the chapel of the house. She made it several times to the garden but could not get past it. She also noted that she could no longer look at medals or pictures of saints. They sparkled so immensely that she could not stand it. After this supposed confirmation of demonic possession by Thea Hines, the Michel family was all in on why their daughter was experiencing what she was, even to the extent that Anna, her mother, claims that she saw stigmata on her daughter. Stigmata in Catholicism are bodily wounds, scars, and pain that appear in locations corresponding to the crucifixion wounds of Jesus Christ, namely the hands, wrists, feet, near the heart, the head, and back. Anna explained what she saw in an interview, saying, "One morning I entered Anneliese's room and said, 'Anneliese, you were in bed today.' I usually found her kneeling before the crucifix or doing some other form of penance. I noticed the wounds on her feet, which were very swollen. This had occurred during the night. She later received the same on her hands. Her hands were not as bad as her feet. She suffered very much from these wounds." Anneliese's family and community became more entrenched in the demonic possession narrative when she started displaying some alarming behavior. Anneliese began obsessively performing hundreds of squats each day, between 400 and 600 by most estimates, until she ruptured her knee ligaments. She crawled beneath a table for 2 days, barking like a dog. She ate spiders and coal and bit off the head of a dead bird. Her screams could be heard for hours through her home's walls, and she was also known to urinate on the floor and then lick it up. As her condition worsened, she could no longer differentiate between reality and delusion. The Exorcisms. With her therapy and various pharmaceutical drugs having no effect on ridding her of this affliction, Anneliese believed that the only way to deal with the demons that plagued her was religion, more specifically an exorcism. The Michel family contacted multiple priests looking for an exorcism rite to be performed on her. The priests declined them twice, urging that medical care be continued and informing the family that exorcisms needed approval from the bishop. Under Catholic Church laws, formal authority for an exorcism is given when the individual precisely fits the prescribed conditions and is believed to be under possession and under demonic domination. When Anneliese's grandmother died on May 15, 1975, her condition drastically declined. By 1975, the church yielded. The local bishop, Josef Stangl, granted Anneliese's third request when she gained backing from Father Ernest Alt, who believed her illness went beyond seizures and hallucinations. In a letter, the bishop wrote, "After due consideration with good information, I now charge the Reverend Father Renz, Salvatorian, Superior in Ruk Shipach, to proceed to Miss Anneliese within the terms of CIC Can 1151. For some time now my prayers have been directed to this concern. May God give us his help. I thank everyone sincerely for their efforts." The bishop instructed Pastor Arnold Renz to collaborate with Father Alt to execute an exorcism ritual used by the church that dates back to the 1600s, with the stipulation that they do so in complete secrecy. This go-ahead was given even though they were completely aware of her epileptic history and diagnosis. Bishop Stangl approved Anneliese's exorcism on faith without demanding any proof of her mental health history or a secondary medical assessment from a neurologist or psychiatrist. The rite of exorcism was performed on Anneliese for the first, but by no means the last time, by Father Arnold Renz on September 24, 1975. As the exorcisms began, her parents had complete faith in the procedure and stopped consulting doctors, even though her weight and her health continued to rapidly decline. During her brutal sessions with the priest, Anneliese divulged the names of several of the more prominent demons that possessed her. This list included the souls of history's most notorious villains, including Cain, Judas, Nero, Lucifer, and Hitler. These demonic spirits would communicate through Anneliese, sharing their evil wisdom and even arguing with one another. Hitler, according to Anneliese's mother, would talk with an actual Austrian accent and remark that people were as dumb as pigs. Meanwhile, Judas would argue that Hitler was not a big deal in hell. Anneliese would continually speak of sacrificing herself to atone for the day's rebellious youngsters and modern-day heretical clergymen. To prove her demonic possession, Father Renz reportedly filled 5 bottles with water, some containing tap water, while others contained holy water blessed by the priests according to Catholic standards. It was determined that Anneliese demonstrated an adverse reaction only when the holy water was sprinkled on her. Over 9 months, sessions lasting up to 4 hours were conducted once or twice weekly to drive out these demons from Anneliese. All in all, Anneliese was subjected to a total of 67 of these excruciating exorcisms. Father Renz permitted some of the sessions to be recorded, and around 42 hours of recordings of Anneliese's exorcisms have been made available, with what those tapes contain being described as horrific. Anneliese's voice in the recordings sounds inhuman and demon-like. On the tapes, she gurgles, growls, hisses, and spews obscenities. Some have noticed that her voice on these recordings sounds similar to Linda Blair's in the controversial film The Exorcist, which was released in December 1973. Anneliese also demonstrated what witnesses described as superhuman strength, and her conduct would become so aggressive that she had to be held down, tied to her chair, or otherwise restrained so that the priests could continue performing the exorcism rites. While going through these traumatic exorcisms, Anneliese made an ill-founded decision to stop eating. The once beautiful young woman started to resemble a scrawny, wild creature. The thinner and smaller she got, the more erratic she became. Anneliese would have lucid moments every now and again. During these times, she would spend time with her boyfriend, Peter, and discuss their future plans. They wanted to marry after her alleged possession ended. Underneath the terror, there seems to have been a genuine hope that the medication, exorcisms, or both might cure Anneliese of whatever was haunting her. Anneliese and Peter once took a stroll in the nearby woods. However, once there, Anneliese headed off alone. Peter said she was in a trance-like condition. She would later claim to have walked with the Virgin Mary that day. Anneliese reported that Mary had told her, "It pains my heart that so many souls are going to hell. Someone needs to do penance. Would you like to do penance for the souls so that they do not enter hell?" Anneliese said she was given 3 days to consider Mary's proposition. When they arrived home, she told her family about her incredible vision. She said that she felt better than she had in a long time. It was almost as if Mary had freed Anneliese of her possessions while she contemplated the proposition. The Michel family was at first wary of her vision, but they couldn't deny the joy it provided them to see Anneliese in better condition. However, when Anneliese declared her willingness to accept Mary's proposal, her parents' fears resurfaced. Her mother attempted to discourage her, but to no avail. The last exorcism was performed on June 30th, 1976, and her last words to her mother were, "Please, absolution, Mama, stay with me. I am afraid." With this last exorcism, the priests announced that the demons inside her had finally been expelled. The following day, on July 1st, 1976, after years of screaming, growling, and obscenity-laced outbursts, the Michel house fell silent. The demons were gone. Anneliese lay in her bed, dead. She weighed only 68 pounds. She was 23 years old, a ragged, crazed stick figure caricature of what she had once been. The consequences. The resulting autopsy and cause of death didn't come as a surprise. Anneliese had died from malnutrition, dehydration, and a severe pneumonia infection due to her weakened state. Her autopsy also revealed cracked teeth and broken kneecaps. Her knee ligaments were damaged as a result of 600 genuflections, or dropping to one's knee in worship, which she incessantly did throughout each exorcism session. By the time of her final exorcism, she was too weak to complete the genuflection on her own, so her parents assisted in carrying her through the process. The skin surrounding her eyes was also black and blue. An investigation was launched immediately into her death, and investigators charged her parents and priests, Ernst Alt and Arnold Renz, with negligent homicide. Anneliese was buried close to her sister Martha on the cemetery's outer boundaries, a location usually designated for illegitimate children and people who had taken their own lives. On February 25, 1978, over 2 years after her death, Anneliese's remains were exhumed and moved to a new oak coffin. Anna, her mother, said that after her daughter died, they were in a hurry to bury her and wanted her to be buried in a more costly coffin. This was a lie. The Michels had Anneliese's remains exhumed before the trial when a nun informed them she had a vision that Anneliese's body was not decomposed in the grave. If this proved to be true, it would be proof that something supernatural was going on and that the exorcism was necessary. Suffice it to say, the body was decomposing naturally. The trial of the 4 accused began on March 30, 1978, just 5 days after her exhumation, in the district court, and was closely followed by the German public. Anneliese's parents were represented by renowned lawyer Erich Schmidt-Leichner. Leichner created a reputation for himself by defending Nazi Germany's major industrialists during the Nuremberg trials. The Catholic Church appointed and paid for the defense counsel of the 2 priests, Alt and Renz. At the beginning of the trial, the prosecution requested that none of the involved parties be jailed if found guilty. Instead, they recommended that the priests be fined and argued that the parents had suffered enough, a consideration permitted under German penal law. During the trial, medical professionals testified that Anneliese was not possessed, saying that the appearance of demonic possession was a psychological result of her zealot-like religious upbringing and temporal lobe epilepsy. Schmidt-Leichner argued on behalf of the parents that the exorcism was legal and that the German constitution guaranteed citizens freedom to practice their religious beliefs. The defense also went as far as to play the tapes recorded at the exorcism sessions, sometimes featuring what was claimed to be demons arguing to assert their claim that Anneliese was possessed. The priests would justify their actions by alleging that the demons had identified themselves as Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Adolf Hitler, and Nero, among others. They also asserted that Anneliese was finally free of demonic possession as a consequence of the exorcism performed shortly before her death. In April 1978, the Michels, Alt and Renz were convicted of negligent homicide, but to everyone's surprise, they were merely sentenced to suspended jail time and had to pay the legal expenses for the trial. So what actually killed Anneliese Michel? In physical terms, malnutrition, dehydration, and pneumonia led to her death, but the cause had deeper roots than that. Was it the infamous demons inhabiting her body, or was it a perfect storm of hyperreligiosity, mental illness, and harmful archaic rituals that completed the puzzle of her horrific death? We think it's safe to say that the perfect storm of mental illness, brutal exorcisms, and ultra-religious beliefs was what most likely happened in the death of Anneliese Michel. To understand what agony and torment Anneliese went through during her 67 exorcisms, we need to delve into this ancient and, to put it bluntly, unnecessary religious rite. Exorcisms at a glance. The notion that demons exist and may possess human beings is common in fiction and horror films, but it is also one of the world's most widely held religious beliefs. Most faiths believe that people may be possessed by evil spirits and perform exorcisms in order to mitigate this perceived danger. The belief that invasive spirits are fundamentally evil is primarily a Judeo-Christian doctrine. While many people consider exorcisms to be relics of the Dark Ages, they are still performed typically on emotionally and psychologically troubled persons. Exorcisms are almost always performed on people with profound religious convictions. Exorcisms work partly because of the power of persuasion and psychology tapping into religious beliefs. In essence, if you think you're possessed and that an exorcism would heal you, it just might. The Vatican established its first formal exorcism instructions in 1614, which were amended in 1999. According to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, indications of demonic possession include superhuman strength, aversion to holy water, and the capacity to communicate in other languages. Spitting, swearing, and excessive masturbation are also potential indicators of demonic possession. According to reports, Anneliese exhibited 5 of these signs. Along with a few Vatican-approved exorcists, there are hundreds of self-proclaimed exorcists across the globe. Michael Cuneo, who attended 50 exorcisms while researching his book, American Exorcism, Expelling Demons in the Land of Plenty, claims that he never witnessed anything supernatural or unexplainable, such as levitation, spinning heads, or demonic scratch marks appearing on anyone's faces, but did witness many emotionally troubled people on both sides of the rituals. Anneliese's tragic story is far from an isolated incident. In 2003, an autistic 8-year-old boy in Milwaukee, Wisconsin was killed during an exorcism by church members who blamed an attacking demon for his disability. In 2005, a young nun in Romania died at the hands of a priest during an exorcism after being bound to a cross, gagged, and left for days without food or water in an attempt to expel demons. On Christmas Day 2010, relatives in London, England beat and drowned a 14-year-old boy, Christy Bamu, to expel an evil spirit from him. Unfortunately, it appears that tragedies like these won't be the last. In 2013, the Roman Catholic Church declared that it was training a new army of exorcists to address the rising demand for professionals who could rid someone of demonic spirits. The Church said that the unprecedented rise in calls for exorcism is due to more people dabbling in the dark arts, using material available on the internet. Diabolical possessions are on the increase as a result of people subscribing to occultism, said Father Francesco Bamonti, the president of the Italy-based International Association for Exorcists. The few exorcists that we have in the diocese are often not able to handle the enormous number of requests for help, he told a news outlet. In 2018, the Vatican-backed International Association of Exorcists said that the growth constituted a pastoral emergency. Gabriele Amort, a Catholic priest and exorcist from the Diocese of Rome, claimed to have conducted over 160,000 exorcisms throughout his service. In October 2000, it was claimed that he carried out over 50,000 exorcisms, ranging in duration from a few minutes to several hours. In March 2010, he said that the number had risen to 70,000. By May 2013, he claimed to have conducted 160,000 exorcisms throughout his career. According to Amort, each exorcism does not represent a victim of possession. Rather, each exorcism is considered as a prayer or ritual alone. Some possessed people needed hundreds of exorcisms. He ascribed the high number of exorcisms to his belief that people have lost their faith, and superstition, magic, Satanism, or Ouija boards have taken its place, which then opens all doors to the presence of demons. All in all, Anneliese went through 67 exorcisms, lasting anything between 2 and 12 hours each, being screamed at by priests and screaming at the priests. In a majority of the exorcisms, she was chained or held down while experiencing seizure-like episodes. All of this while being severely malnourished and dehydrated. As we've said before, exorcisms work partly because of the power of persuasion and psychology tapping into your religious beliefs, which in Anneliese's case was in no short supply. Hyperreligiosity. Hyperreligiosity is a mental disorder in which a person has extreme religious beliefs or episodes that disrupt normal functioning. Hyperreligiosity is characterized by unusual beliefs and an emphasis on religious or atheistic content, which interferes with professional and social functioning. The signs and symptoms of hyperreligiosity are characterized by an increased tendency to report supernatural or mystical experiences, spiritual delusions, and an extravagant expression of piety. Hyperreligiosity may also include religious hallucinations. Anneliese's hyperreligiosity seemed to have two distinct facets to it. her upbringing, and mental illness. From what we know of Anneliese's childhood, she grew up in an ultra-religious and dysfunctional home. Josef Michel was a Nazi soldier who fought the Russians on the horrifying Eastern Front during World War II. At the conclusion of the war, he fought his way back to the West and surrendered to American and British troops. Like many soldiers at the time, this left him empty and emotionally disconnected. In the present day, Josef would most certainly be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Anneliese Michel was extremely religious and disciplined. She grew up in a period when half of her town was recruited to fight in the war, and the other half were shipped to the concentration camps. She was also certain that her family would suffer as a result of their genetic or hereditary impurity by being socially rejected, since her children were not healthy and robust, which most likely stemmed from the Nazi propaganda while she was growing up. Anneliese and her sisters were not permitted to associate with boys throughout their upbringing. This also meant no overnight stays at friends' homes who had brothers. Later, this included not being allowed to go to school dances. There have also been reports that Anneliese's relationship with her mother was complicated at times, owing to Anneliese Michel's controlling personality and desire to protect her delicate daughter. This control would come in the form of Anneliese being prevented from participating in activities typical of girls her age. For example, at the age of 14, Anneliese was barred from taking ballroom dance courses owing to concerns about her fragile health. At an early age, a doctor, Lena, diagnosed Anneliese with a typical case of neurosis induced by her dysfunctional family. He specifically mentioned Anneliese's disdain for her mother and her use of sacred items and prayers to control and chastise her children. This might well explain Anneliese's eventual distaste of these religious elements. They were a sign of her mother's control, which may have represented a form of trauma for Anneliese, which, in her diminished mental capacity, came to the forefront during the exorcisms. Anneliese's family weren't the only ones pushing her into this hyperreligiosity state. To many who followed the case closely, Father Ernst Alt acted as a catalyst to exacerbate Anneliese's obvious mental issues. Alt asserted that he possessed telepathic and psychic abilities, which is generally frowned upon by the Catholic Church. He also claimed that he had a unique God-given ability to determine whether a person was under demonic control or just physically sick. During the trial, a psychiatrist described Alt as having an abnormal personality in the wildest sense of the term. Parts of his prehistory, as he reported them, even suggest the presence of a psychosis of the schizophrenic type. On December 26, 1973, the film The Exorcist was released in a world where demonic possession had been mostly forgotten. While the book's debut in 1971 had already resulted in a significant increase in possession fever, the worldwide success of the film shone a fresh light on Catholic priests as saviors of the possessed. The impact of the movie must have been significant for a priest who was already overconfident in his ability to identify demons. In a letter to the Bishop of Würzburg, Alt claimed to have been physically nauseated by Michel's communications, attacked by swarms of insects, and seen supernatural beings scurrying around him. Some evidence from the trial implies that Alt intended to perform a successful exorcism in order to publish books and to go on a lecture circuit for profit. However, this has never been proven conclusively. By far the most pertinent factor attributed to Anneliese's death was her mental state. Mental health. From the medical perspective, Anneliese was clearly suffering from a form of epilepsy known as temporal lobe epilepsy and extreme episodes of schizophrenic psychosis. Temporal lobe epilepsy may be an explanation for many of the religious experiences that Anneliese claimed to have. The voices. Anneliese first reported hearing knocking in March and April of 1973. Anneliese went to see an audiologist after none of her family members could hear this knocking sound, but no issues were found with her hearing. Surprisingly, once someone in their religious group claimed that the sounds were produced by demons, Anna claimed to hear them as well. Our medical understanding has advanced by leaps and bounds since the 1970s, and modern medicine has shown that epilepsy may generate complex auditory verbal hallucinations, or AVHs. Auditory hallucination, also known as paracusia, is a kind of hallucination in which you perceive noises without hearing them. During an auditory hallucination, the afflicted individual perceives a sound or noises that are not from their natural surroundings. A typical kind of auditory hallucination is hearing one or more voices without a speaker present. Cat-like hands. On June 3, 1970, Anneliese had her third seizure. She experienced sleep paralysis and felt a heavy weight pushing her down, like she had on the previous 2 occasions. She had also urinated on herself. When she recovered, her screams awoke the rest of the clinic and alerted the nurses. The nurses and other children in the ward noted her hands locked rigidly, like a cat extending its claws. Without knowing what was happening to Anneliese, the children assumed she was insane and told her she was possessed by the devil. What had happened to Anneliese is called dystonic posture, which is an unnatural stiffening of one arm, occurring during a seizure. Her bedwetting can be attributed to a well-known symptom of a seizure: olfactory sensations. As mentioned, Anneliese claimed she could smell scents that others couldn't. One instance is when she got a strong odor of violets that she attributed to the Virgin Mary, and the others were fecal matter and an intense burning smell. Phantosmia, also called an olfactory hallucination or a phantom odor, is smelling an odor that is not actually there. Unpleasant phantosmia or cacosmia is more common and is often described as smelling something that is burned, foul, spoiled, or rotten. It can be a symptom of certain mental disorders such as depression, bipolar disorder, or psychotic disorders. Phantosmia has been found to coexist in patients with other disorders such as schizophrenia and epilepsy, both of which Anneliese is thought to have suffered from. Speaking in tongues. People on the pro-demon narrative side of this story believe that Anneliese's ability to speak in tongues or a second language is proof of her possession. As we don't know exactly which type of epilepsy Anneliese suffered from, it may be safe to say that she could have had symptoms of another epilepsy type, namely frontal lobe epilepsy. Symptoms of frontal lobe epilepsy include explosive screams, including profanities or laughter, abnormal body posturing, and repetitive movements. Anneliese displayed all of these symptoms throughout her life. But there might be a non-medical explanation as to why Anneliese could converse in a language other than her own. At first glance, one of the most convincing signs of possession was that Anneliese could fluidly switch between German and Latin. There were also smatterings of other languages encountered. This was impressive until it was discovered that she was fluent in Latin and had been extensively exposed to Greek as part of her Latin studies. She was also frequently exposed to various other European languages at school, including English and Polish. Other than temporal lobe epilepsy, Anneliese was thought to have had severe schizophrenic psychosis. When looking at the symptoms of schizophrenia, a further explanation for Anneliese's disturbing behavior starts to make sense. Schizophrenia is a serious mental health illness that affects people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It may cause a combination of hallucinations, delusions, and disordered thought and behavior. Delusions. This is when people believe in things that are neither real nor true. For example, persons with schizophrenia may believe they are being harmed or harassed when they are not. They may believe they are famous or have significant abilities when this is not true. Alternatively, they may think that an impending catastrophe is imminent when this is not the case. The majority of people with schizophrenia suffer from delusions. Anneliese was severely delusional, and her behavior ticks all of the boxes associated with delusions when it comes to schizophrenia. She believed that she was being punished by the demons for being a good Catholic and being pious. She also believed that, like Jesus Christ, she needed to suffer for the sins of others, but may have underestimated what this entailed. In a letter to her father Arnold, she wrote, "Oh Father, I never thought it would be as cruel as this. I always thought I would want to suffer for others so they would not have to go to hell, but I did not realize it could be this bad and this cruel and terrible. People think suffering is an easy matter, but when things get really awful, you don't want to go on. You don't want to take a single step further. Anneliese also believed that the world was about to end, and she was the only person who could tell humanity about it. Hallucinations. These frequently include seeing or hearing things that others do not notice. For those with schizophrenia, these phenomena seem to be real. Hallucinations may affect any of the senses, but hearing voices is the most prevalent. It was sometime during her stay at the clinic that Anneliese first reported encountering fratsen, or ghastly demonic faces. Whenever she saw them, she claimed to feel empty, as if the devil was inside of her. Anneliese would also claim to have seen demons mocking the priests as they performed the exorcisms. Additionally, she would assert that she had walked in the company of the Virgin Mary. Disorganized or unusual motor behavior. This symptom may show in several ways, from childlike silliness to being agitated for no reason. People with schizophrenia may move in ways that are not typical or not appropriate to the social setting, or they may not move much or respond at all. Anneliese's motor movements were, to say the least, extreme and disturbing. Compulsively doing hundreds of squats and debilitating genuflections a day, no matter how devoted you are to religion, was indeed a sign of severe mental illness. Science and religion clash. What shocked the German public the most about this case was that it could happen in a nation known for its rationality and secularism. The surprising thing was that the people connected to Michel were all completely convinced that she had really been possessed, said Franz Barthel, a journalist who covered the case in the 70s. Many years later, I visited Tia Heinz, who first diagnosed the devil, Barthel said. She blessed my microphone with holy water because I was working for the radio then, and it was likely that the devil was in control of the microphone. The trial of the 4 accused would serve as a referendum on the question of science and reason versus faith. German authorities did not want to be seen as accepting the existence of the devil as a legitimate defense. At the same time, the Church had an immense stake in keeping Satan real. If demons don't exist and priests cannot exert power over them in the name of Christ, parts of the Bible are called into question, perhaps leading an already secular country to question religion even more than they already did. While the court heard arguments supporting Anneliese's possession, the court generally handled the issue in a manner that minimized the devil's existence. The Anneliese Michel trial became an enormous media spectacle, and German priests were humiliated to be involved with what they considered outdated customs, mainly because the exorcism performed on Anneliese dates back to 1614. After this debacle, members of the German Catholic Church worked together to reform the Church's exorcism policies. German bishops and theologians organized a committee to study church policies, and in 1984, they petitioned the Vatican to change its stance on exorcism. The German committee was particularly worried by addressing the demons directly throughout the ceremony, such as stating, "I command thee, unclean spirit." The commission determined that this part of the ritual caused the most psychological harm, because when the priest addressed the demon rather than the patient sees an authority figure confirming the presence of a demon within them, which exacerbates the delusion that is often at the heart of possession cases. The German Commission's petition expressly requested that the Vatican remove and ban this component of the exorcism rites. The Vatican waited 15 years to return a verdict on the matter, and when they eventually addressed exorcism in 1999, the German Church did not get what it wanted. The newly amended exorcism formula retained the option of speaking directly to the devil inside the possessed. Anneliese Michel's case is profoundly poignant, intricate and rife with questions regarding faith, mental health, and the consequences of devout belief. Anneliese's suffering and eventual death was distinguished by a combination of religious beliefs, physical and mental issues, a strong belief in demonic possession, and a dysfunctional upbringing. Anneliese Michel's gravesite, now a dark tourist attraction, continues attracting people who believe in her deep atonement for the sins of others. Some pilgrims believe Anneliese's grave may purify souls, which would likely delight Anneliese, who was convinced that her death would atone for the sins of others.